Westminster, Colorado is a highly desirable location to move if you're considering relocating to the Denver area. Located on the northwestern side of the city, Westminster provides you easy access into Denver, but also easy access outside of the city, where you can disappear off into beautiful locations in and along the Front Range. But what are some issues with the suburb? Are there only good things to say about Westminster? Well, like any place you're trying to move to, no. But I have to explain a bit more for it to make sense. Let's get into it. Let's talk first about some of the benefits of Westminster, so you can get a better idea of whether it's a place to call home. The first would be location. As I mentioned before, Westminster is located on the northwestern side of the greater Denver area. As a result, the commute into the city is quick, only about a 20-minute drive into the center of the city. But perhaps your work takes you into Boulder. And well, since Westminster sits along Route 36, which is the main connection between Denver and Boulder, it's only about a 25-minute drive up that highway. And you get some terrific views of the Flatirons as you head into work. And so one thing to highlight is Westminster's proximity to the heart of the city. Being so close, it makes for an easy commute to practically anywhere in the Denver area, at least compared to suburbs that are farther on the outskirts. Now, there are some cons to being so close to Denver, which I'll talk about soon, but the pro is if you're trying to get anywhere, it won't take long. The Denver International Airport, too, which is located on the far eastern side of the greater Denver area, is only about a 30-minute drive. So even places in the southern half of Denver can be at most 45 minutes away. Traffic plays a role practically anywhere you want to go. But in the grand scheme of things, Westminster is located in a convenient part of the city that allows you to get practically anywhere without much issue. Another benefit for living in Westminster is that it's an affordable option for Denver. There is no denying that Denver leans heavily on the expensive side, especially compared to the national average. Denver is 52% more expensive for a single family home compared to the national average. The median home price here right now sits at about $640,000. And for condos, it's about $410,000. But when we look at Westminster, the median price for a single family home is currently just under $620,000. Then when we look at townhomes and condos, the median price is just about $358,000. So from a dollar amount, the single family homes in Westminster are about $20,000 cheaper, and the townhomes and condos are $52,000 cheaper. But let's also look at price per square foot. So for a single family home, the median price per square foot sits at $254, which means that the median size of homes in Westminster are 2,440 square feet. For townhomes and condos, the median price per square foot is $280, which means the median size of these properties are around 1,278 square feet. Now compare this to the greater Denver area. I'll save you the numbers right now. And Westminster single family homes are 20% larger, while the townhomes and condos are about 5% larger. So potentially within the margin of error for the latter. And we'll just be conservative and say those are the same size. But what that means overall is that in Westminster you're finding a more affordable home, which is slightly cheaper and 20% larger than homes found in the greater Denver area. Now that's for single family homes. For townhomes and condos, they're about the same size. However, you're paying around $52,000 less for the property. Quite a difference, right? Now another benefit of living in Westminster is that it's a built up and established suburb. Being so close to Denver, it's going to provide a lot of amenities, variation, and opportunities compared to the other farther away suburbs that aren't quite as built up. Obviously, this section ties heavily into location, but there are suburbs farther away from the center of the city that are less developed, and they don't provide you with a ton of commercial and recreational opportunities. Instead, in those suburbs, you're more likely going to have to drive into other suburbs to get these types of opportunities. But as you get closer to the city, the ability to access really anything you want increases. Everything by nature is next to each other, so there really isn't an issue with accessibility to commercial areas or recreational spots. In Westminster, you have these opportunities. There are numerous shopping locations in and around the suburb. There are terrific open areas and parks to get a nice break from suburban life and enjoy some of the natural environment that can be found along the Front Range. And if Westminster doesn't technically have it within the town limits, you're next to other suburbs like Broomfield, Thornton, and Arvada, which do. It won't be much of an issue for you. Westminster is not an isolated suburb. So if we transition now to the cons of Westminster, the first is actually related to cost, and that's the cost of living in Westminster compared to outside the Denver area. Really, outside Colorado itself. I mentioned before that the median home price in Westminster is around $620,000. Well, that's still $200,000 more than the national average. First off, home prices to begin with are high across the country. Now increase that by 47% for Westminster. It's no secret that Colorado leans on the expensive side when it comes to home price, in the context of other states in the nation. And given the current market, it's not unrealistic to run the numbers and to determine that Westminster's affordability it's not there, even though it's a more affordable suburb relative to the Denver area. It's Westminster's relation to coming from other states outside of Colorado that can be a shock. I definitely recommend running the numbers on your budget before you consider Westminster, if you haven't already. Now, the next con is going to be the reality that although Westminster's location is great if you're looking at being close to the heart of Denver, it is more crowded. The total density of this suburb compared to those farther on the outskirts is going to be higher. That's just the reality of living anywhere close to a city. Now, let's be fair here. I'm not saying that Westminster is like taking a stroll down Capitol Hill or anything. The aesthetic of Westminster is still very suburban. But if you were to look at suburbs farther away, like Longmont or Superior to name a few, yes, those do have a bit of a suburban aesthetic. However, it's complemented with a more rural feel on the edges. It's the byproduct of living in Boulder County, but also just farther away from the urban living of Denver. In Westminster, being so close to the city, you're not really going to experience that as much, or at least without a little bit of a drive. If you're looking for a suburb that's more remote and less populated, then I wouldn't recommend this one. Now, piggybacking off of that, comes something that will add to this crowded feeling, and that's traffic. If you're living in Westminster and you don't work from home, you're commuting to work, obviously. As a result, set expectations to encounter quite a bit of traffic, especially on Route 36 going into Denver, but then also on I-25, practically everywhere in the city. I'd argue just right off the section of I-25 in the center of Denver as always having traffic. That's what I had to do. This can be a big con for some. Nobody likes traffic, but it's especially frustrating if you have to plan your entire route or commute around it, even when it's just for a weekend trip or some afternoon drive to Boulder or somewhere else. Being so close to the city, you get the unfortunate consequence of a highly populated area. And so in all, I'd argue Westminster has some strong pros that make it a desirable suburb to move to. But of course, no town is perfect. Each one of these pros seems to have a con attached to it, and whether or not you like it is going to depend on what you're looking for. But if what I just mentioned about traffic and feeling crowded in Westminster has turned you off from the suburb, then I recommend checking out these videos here. Both are great locations north of Denver, far enough away that you're a bit more secluded from the urban aesthetic, but not too far where you can't get into the city if you wanted to. You may find these to be a good choice too. This is Life on the Front Range. I'll see you there.